Hey, I'm Ari from the Tech Buyers Guru, and today I'm going to be reviewing SilverStone's new PS14-E ATX case. This is a case that comes in at a very reasonable price point. It's actually $65 on Amazon right now. It is a budget case. It's oriented towards cost-conscious users, but it has a lot of high-end features that you normally don't see on a case at this price point. And it's not about necessarily premium materials, but more so really good engineering design. And that's why I really like this case, and I'm excited to be showing it off to you today. So let's start with what you have on the outside. You've got this tempered glass panel, full coverage on the side here. You've got 4 thumb screws. That's pretty standard these days. A higher end case would have like a sliding panel or a hinge panel, but at this price point, I think these thumb screws are just fine. Up front, you have a solid panel. That's actually very, very popular these days. Now there is a side effect to that, which is of course you get less airflow. You get no airflow through the front, but SilverStone has done some really great engineering work. What you're going to see on the side is a number of vents all the way from the top to the bottom, and they are angled downwards. These are large vents that allow a lot of air through, and yet to minimize the amount of sound that reaches your ears as the user, they're angled downwards. And this is something that SilverStone actually pioneered on an earlier case. I believe it was the KL07, which came in at a higher price point. But now we've seen that trickle down to this budget-oriented case. Another feature I really like is you've got a removable mesh top covering the top panel. That gives you really easy access to all of the fan and radiator mounting rails. And I should note that my favorite feature of this case is that despite being quite compact, it actually holds 140 millimeter fans in the front, rear, and top, and can also fit a 240 millimeter liquid cooling radiator up top. Now that's despite the fact that SilverStone actually isn't marketing this case with that feature. And the reason I know it works is because I've got one in here right now. I asked SilverStone about this specifically, and they said, well, they were a little bit worried that someone would see the optical drive bay up in front and think, well, I want to use that optical drive bay and a liquid cooling radiator, which you can't do. So you actually have to pull that out, and I've actually taken the whole mounting cage out of there, which is modular, which is really nice. So from my point of view, that's a win-win. You've got the option to run an optical drive bay, which is pretty unusual these days, but there's still users who want that out there. And then you've got the option to put in a high-performance cooling system, which you typically can't fit into cases this size, and actually much larger cases as well often advertise compatibility with tap-mounted radiators, but then they fail to actually fit that type of cooler. Now, the only drawback to this system, this layout, is that in the back there's very little room for cable management. Now I'm going to remove this panel and show you what it looks like back here. I should warn you, it's not pretty. The issue is that there's very, very little space back here for cables. You have to have flat lock cables for your power supply. If you have an older power supply with the large chunky cables, they're really not going to fit back here. You're also going to probably want a pretty short power supply. I'm using a 140 millimeter model from SilverStone. 140 millimeters is becoming fairly standard in ATX power supplies, but older models would be more like 170 or 180, and you're going to have a hard time fitting those in here and actually having room for the cables to either to store them here or even to route them out. Now the other thing that we lose on this case versus larger cases or even cases the same size that have a smaller main compartment is that there's no space back here for solid state drives. So typically on modern cases you have a couple of mounts here. There's no space at all for anything to mount flush against the back of the motherboard. SilverStone, interestingly, has mounts on this side, but they're actually intended for you to mount the SSDs in the main compartment of the chassis, which is a little bit unusual. I chose not to do that. Instead, I chose to mount my 2.5-inch drives in the 3.5-inch drive bays down at the bottom. You get 2 in this case, and I've actually used both. They're very convenient to use. They hold hard drives up to 3.5-inch, of course, and they also hold those 2.5-inch drives like SSDs. One other nice feature is that SilverStone does include a fine mesh filter for the power supply. There you can see it. This is a high quality mesh. It'll catch all that dust coming up from the floor and of course can be cleaned. That'll keep your power supply free of debris. Now, in a somewhat unusual move, SilverStone includes a graphics card brace so that you can actually mount it vertically using these two mounts here. Now, that's getting popular in really high-end gaming cases, but the truth of the matter is that this is going to be right up against your glass panel and it's going to really cut off airflow to your video card. So I don't actually recommend you use this. This is how you install it. You slide it in at a 90-degree angle and then you just turn it and the case comes with a screw to secure it. So that's how that works, but I don't actually recommend using it. It's a little bit of an odd addition for a budget-oriented case. What's so astounding about this case is that it could keep up with much more expensive cases, both in terms of noise levels and temperatures. I'm going to show you some data that I collected running benchmarks using this case with the same equipment that I used in a Be Quiet Dark-Base Pro 900 Revision 2, which is a case that costs over 4 times as much. And I also have data from the H500P Mesh, which is Cooler Master's premium high airflow case for gamers. Now, overall, what you're going to see is that the PS14-E really split the difference nicely. It's actually fairly quiet. Under extreme load, it's not as quiet as the Be Quiet Dark-Base Pro, but it's always as quiet as H500P, and you actually get very good airflow too. Look at the temps. The temps are really quite on par, particularly for the CPU here. When I get into my gaming benchmark, which loads up both the GPU and CPU, the PS14-E falls slightly behind, but it's still in the running. And keep in mind that this case only costs $65. Overall, I'm really pleased with this case. I'm amazed that SilverStone has learned through the years how to make a case that comes in at a very low price point and yet performs immensely well. We're looking at very low noise levels and very high airflow for a case that you wouldn't expect to see that in. It all comes from smart engineering, the ability to use large radiators, large 140mm fans throughout. The only trade-off is that there isn't that much space in the back for cable management. But unless you're in and out of your case a lot switching out gear, it's really not an issue. You're just going to have to take your time during that first build experience to get those cables managed. And I do suggest a 140mm long power supply. Larger power supplies are going to be hard to fit back there. The other thing is that, hey, SilverStone's really underselling this case because I fit a 240mm radiator with no trouble. In fact, it fit much better than a lot of other cases that are much larger and much more expensive. So I'm just putting that out there so people know that you can actually use this as a gaming case and still have a pretty quiet gaming experience, have really good thermals, and come in at a fantastic price. So overall, I actually give this case 5 out of 5 stars. Does that mean it's perfect? Not really, but I consider it perfect for the price. All right, so it all comes down to what does it offer at that price point, and the price point's just so low that, hey, you don't expect much, and it comes away as a winner in so many areas. Again, I'm Ari from the Tech Buyers Guru. If you like this review, please like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.